Hey, I'm Jake, and welcome back to The Gallery. The Gallery is where we house weekly deep dives on all things Startup Studio related. Startup studios have grown at an incredible rate over the last 5 years especially, but there's a lot of chatter on the web about how strong the model is, the return profile, how to do it successfully, and so much more. So The Gallery is now here to be the ultra 401 level technical content source for all things Startup Studio GPs, LPs, entrepreneurs, and operators need to know. We do deep dives every week in the form of a podcast, blog, and newsletter. You can subscribe at thegallery.tv. And we also have daily short form content on all of our social media channels. So if you want daily content, but also weekly deep dives, we invite you to subscribe. Without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. So Josh, you're at Cartwheel Startup Studio. I'm super excited for this episode. And for everyone listening right now, I just want to give a little bit of a quick backstory and kick off to why Josh is here in the first place. So we probably met, like 2 years ago now, if sounds about right.
Sounds right. Yeah, that's probably right.
So let's call it 2 years ago. And at the time, and even still today, the question of family offices was coming up all the time in the startup studio conversation. And most of the time, the question is, how do I raise from family offices? And the answer is typically, well, when you talk to one family office, you've talked to one family office. Like, they're all so different. So for everyone listening right now, Josh and his team have raised from arguably the biggest or one of the biggest family offices in the world, the Walton Family Foundation. And for anybody who's not familiar, that is the family that founded Walmart, one of the biggest companies in the US. So in today's interview, we're going to talk about quite a few things. Number one, really curious about how Josh and his team, made this happen in the first place, like how they got in touch with the family office, how they made the pitch, how the story went down, how the relationship came to be, and then how they actually got this thing from quick pitch and soft circle to a closed deal. And then looking ahead, what can other studios and what can other family offices learn from this story about this space? So without further ado, Josh, would love to hear your story, man. How'd you find yourself in the studio world? Give us your backstory.
Yeah. I'll try to keep it as short as I can, and then I'm sure I'll get wordy. But I found out about venture studios, startup studios, maybe 6 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was. And then at the time, I was running an agency just before that, I had run an agency called Teamwork that I co-founded with some friends. We ended up selling that agency to a larger agency called RevUnit, based out of Bentonville, Arkansas, the home of Walmart and a lot of the Walton family. And then through that exit, that sale into RevUnit, I ended up eventually moving here. But leading up to that, got to know this venture studio, startup studio model. We had founded another B2B SaaS company during that period that felt a lot like the startup studio model. Essentially, we had a technical co-founder in our network that was a contractor to our agency. He had a small idea that he was making some money per month on. We wrapped a team around him. We deployed some funding to him. It was kind of like a micro studio of sorts, which is individuals acting like a startup studio in some capacity or going through the motions, if nothing else. And I loved it. I thought it was a blast to kind of help this technical co-founder professionalize what he was doing, give him a deeper strategy around how to scale the business. We ended up exiting that company in 2020. It sold to ship.com, and it's been a success story. And so really fell in love with it, this concept. Also at the time, we ended up going and visiting High Alpha out of Indianapolis. Got to know Christian Anderson, one of the partners there. That was about 4 or 5 years ago. And then recently, as I was exiting RevUnit, I ended up running RevUnit for a couple of years, took them through a private equity transaction. So sold my agency to RevUnit, ran RevUnit, helped them go through a private equity transaction, and then ended up leaving about 9 months after that or so to go do this startup studio thing. I was really sold on the idea of what would it look like to get a bigger, more scalable version of what we did with this company that we sold to ship.com. And that was the beginnings of it. And then in 2021, to kind of get to how Cartwheel came about, the beginning of 2021, I had left RevUnit and we started fundraising. Started here in the region, started local. We ended up meeting the guys over at RZC, which is Tom and Stuart Walton's private firm, private investment fund. And they had mentioned like, hey, this is a concept that had been brought up to the Walton family on several occasions. You should really talk to Walton Family Foundation. They might be interested in piloting this to see if this is something that can work here in Northwest Arkansas. So, I mean, short version of this is we did. We did talk to them, and we were able to kind of navigate the nuances of nonprofit funding flowing into for-profit venture. And so, yeah, Walton Family Foundation has been a great partner. And I would say at the heart of this is like, this is a regional play for them. Like this is a foundation and a family that cares very much about Northwest Arkansas and kind of propping up what is the future of this region. How do we get beyond Walmart and Sam's Club being the anchors of this region? What a lot of people don't know, unless you know this region well, is Tyson Foods is based here. You know, top 5 food manufacturer. You've got JB Hunt, top 5 T&L or transportation and logistics company based here. Simmons Foods, George's. Like, there's actually a lot of large corporates based in this region. I'm sure largely attracted to a Fortune 1 that is Walmart, or formed around that core business. But we've got this amazing economy. These are aging companies though. These are massive enterprises. And what we don't have are these up and coming. Like if this were a music festival, we have some headliners at the top of the music festival card, but we're missing the middle up and coming bands, or the next greats. We don't have a bar scene, if you will, here of startups forming. So our thesis really was, how do you drive economic development? How do you drive entrepreneurial ecosystems? Like, you need velocity. You need to fill the top of the funnel. We need to see more startups coming out of this region so that there is that synergy, so that you can have those kind of natural occurrences that happen when you're building a startup ecosystem. So we weren't the silver bullet. We didn't pretend to be the silver bullet. We didn't, say, hey, we're the one and only solution to that. We just said we'd like to contribute to that for this region. And I think that's what was compelling and unique.
I love it. So there's a lot to dig into there. The first thing I want to touch on is, you mentioned that the person who introduced you to the Walton Family Foundation, they mentioned that they had already seen this model a few times. And I remember even I got in touch with them and I pitched them years ago with a studio opportunity. So this wasn't the first studio that came across their desk. What do you think made your opportunity different? And do you know if you guys were the first studio that they funded?
Yeah, they have not funded another studio to my knowledge. I mean, I can't speak on behalf of the family by any means, but to my knowledge, I don't think they've made any other investments in studio-like entities, venture or startup. Ultimately, I think this boiled down to, we're here in town. Like, we're here in Northwest Arkansas, based here, live here, have built businesses here. We've had entrepreneurial success here. Myself and my partner, Chris, and other people on our team are also serial entrepreneurs. So I think it boiled down to, these are people that are here in the region. And again, we told a region story. And I think that's a unique, not unique to us. I'm not saying that we're the only ones out here saying, the startup studios and venture studios can really help propel the economic development of an individual region. But I think because we leaned in there and really focused in on, what is this region's right to win? Like, what is our unfair advantage in Northwest Arkansas? And that was and is to this day what we care about and focus on. It's the retail value chain. When you have a Fortune 1 retailer, when you have food manufacturers, when you have a T&L powerhouse, and we have ArcBest and JB Hunt. Like, we have several companies. Like, we have all of this concentration of enterprise talent and really resources and network that have global reach in those industries, all here. That's why you'd build like, if you can tap into those opportunities, those are the kinds of companies you would build here. Those are the kind of companies that the coasts would want to invest in here, because we have a reason to exist as a startup. So that was our thesis around the studio for building startups. We're going to build startups focused on the retail value chain, which is why any startup might succeed in this region. and we're going to build companies that are based here in Northwest Arkansas. So we have a mandate tied to our studio that other studios probably don't have. But I think the stats play out. So our mandate is all companies must be based here in Northwest Arkansas. Now, can they have remote talent? Yes. Can they have distributed teams like that? Those are table stakes now. You can't live in a world. We don't live in that world anymore where everything's co-located. But the core team, the C-level team, is going to be based here in Arkansas, in Northwest Arkansas in particular, and like that was compelling and interesting. And I think that's something that should be talked about more when you're thinking of a venture studio and startup studio is what's the regional play? Like, what is unique about the region that this studio exists in? What are their capabilities that are mature, or the resources and the network the network effects that are possible to tap into there? And how do I build a studio that leverages that, builds companies in that region? And now I think you start getting family offices to care. Like if I look at Tulsa, and we're very friendly with Tulsa because they're only 2 hours away, I look at the George Kaiser Family Foundation. They've worked with Atento, which is under the George Kaiser umbrella, is working with GetWit, a software development agency based in Tulsa, to build 19 Days, which is a new startup studio. And their thesis is also regional. I think that's becoming more of a compelling reason to do a startup studio that I haven't heard a lot of people talking about. So yeah, when you're talking about family funds, family foundations, and how to tap into them, or how to get them to care, I think that's a narrative that should be considered. It has to be authentic. It shouldn't be done from a manipulative or coercive kind of perspective of like, hey, we're pitching you that we come to your region and build this studio. I think it needs to be like, no, I care about this and we do. I live here. My kids go to school here. My wife is going to the University of Arkansas now for her master's degree. Like, yeah. I'm all in on Northwest Arkansas. So it's not an inauthentic statement to say that we're here for that reason, and we care about this region. We participate and give back. And even our studio, we try to be abundant, have an abundant mindset with our time. In a world that's talking more about saying no, we're saying yes to helping people. Like, I don't care if you're a founder building your own thing that we have no, equity in, stake in, incentive to help you. We'll help you because this is a community. This is about a regional play. So totally. Anyway, I rambled there for a minute. But,
no, it's great. I'll take an aside for a sec because I think what we've seen a lot, especially in the 2020, 2021, 2022, when we saw like just a huge boom of studios. And at the time I was probably looking at 50 new studio decks a week, maybe 100. And a lot of them, I mean, maybe the majority of them were going at it the opposite direction from you guys, which was, okay, we have a general thesis in mind, but we've got a team and this enormous dream and desire to run a studio for whatever reason. It's sexy. It's got great returns. Like the IRR, TVPI data looks outrageous in a good way. So let's build a studio. So who's going to be the right investor for us? And then we identify like who likes us, who could be a good investor, and then create the story of the studio to fit those investors. Which, even saying it out loud, I'm like, that sounds like a terrible strategy. There's no real, for lack of a better word, like heart and soul to it. It's just straight up chasing the money for the wrong reason. So you guys did it in a way that I could look at you and commend and say that you did it for the right reasons. So first question there is, it almost sounds too easy in like, did you have to go out and pitch a ton of family offices, or was it, well, we had this story, we identified this family office, it was the right fit, and a week later we had a term sheet? What happened there?
Yeah. So when we started, we were all private. Like we have a Northwest Arkansas thesis. This is all, Monday morning quarterbacking here. I'm looking back and seeing how this worked. I didn't have the foresight to know that this was the right play, but we believed in Northwest Arkansas as a place that could build startups and didn't have the velocity or the venture capital interests that it deserved. We were out there pitching for private. I mean, we have a very typical model for the startup studio realm, like trying to raise $10 million to build X number of companies over 3.5 years. That model we weren't able to get the kind of traction. Like, we struggled to get family offices to care. We struggled to get VCs to care, and they don't care. They're not on average. I'm not trying to make some blanket statement about all VCs, but just on average, I think they're just not innovative enough to see something beyond a 220 model. If you're a fund of funds, or everybody looked at us and said, this is a blind fund, and like, I don't know what you're going to build. Like, this doesn't make sense. This is against our mandate. Like, there's a million things that were thrown at us for why this was not something they could consider, even if the economics look good. And just to say it, we are capitalists. Like, I want to make money. This isn't a pure altruistic play either. This is we can build great businesses. People can make money. Incentives can be aligned appropriately with founder and studio and investors. But all that to say, like, no, it was a very hard run. We didn't have to do it for that long. To be fair, I don't want to play the martyr here. We were fundraising for 3 months, which is not a long time in the scheme of things. Most people are out there much longer. So, we got lucky in that RZC saw what we did not see, in that, oh, we like what you're saying. We could pilot this through Walton Family Foundation, and then they've continued to invest post-pilot. And actually, we're looking at a much larger kind of model. We're trying to convert over to the venture studio side of this. We're getting creative about how we do that, and I can't speak too much about it. But looking to partner with High Alpha out of Indianapolis, or High Alpha Innovation, to build a bigger studio here in the region. And it's still, at the end of the day, another impact play. It is about, we can build 10 companies in the next 3 years, or 16 companies in the next 4 years. What will happen in a region where 16 companies are all based here? If you go look at what High Alpha did, the main High Alpha, not the innovation arm, which is like a franchising model of High Alpha, which I love. But like, they have their first 17 companies they built. 5 years later, they've created over 750 jobs in that region. Like, that's the narrative we focused on. Like, we can build jobs in this region. These are high wage knowledge worker jobs based here, technology companies based here, that can help this region grow and evolve beyond just being, Walmart's headquarters.
Yeah. Okay. So much for us to keep digging into. When you guys first pitched them, did you have and to the extent that you're able to share and willing to share, did you have a fund or studio structure in mind that you pitched them, and then they pushed back and you met somewhere in the middle? Or did you not really know the right structure, found the right investors first, and then co-created a structure from there? I think this is something a lot of studios are not sure which approach to take. How did you guys do it?
Right. We pitched a dual entity structure, which I think has become more ubiquitous. Like, I think most people know what that is. That is not what we do today. Like, we do not deploy funds. All the funding that comes from Walton Family Foundation funds our operation. It funds the concept of identifying opportunities, validating them, forming, and then facilitating, identify a co-founder, CEO, and all those things, like the typical kind of flow through and pipeline of a studio. But we don't deploy funds at the end. Like, we don't place a pre-seed investment from, an some sort of holding company that would deploy those funds, that has private investors involved, LPs involved. That's not our model. So we only take an equity share as the studio operating team. So our equity looks much lower than most startup studios. We're sub 20%, because we're only doing operational things, and we're helping form. And then we facilitate and support, kind of like an assisted brokerage, like a Fundin or something, around the fundraising. So we bring to the table our network of VCs that are interested in this thesis, connect our new co-founder team. And I think it's unique and different. And also it forces us to build companies that the market identifies with and other investors believe in. So we have to do some investor validation before we form, to go out to market to fund, which a typical startup studio doesn't have to do. They can deploy their, anything from 150 to $1 million, to get a company up and running, and give them 12 to 18 months of runway or less, depending on, everybody's model is a little different. But so yeah, ours is unique in that way, in that we're not deploying funds, but we can do the shared services. We can do a lot of the aspects of a startup studio. It just looks a little different.
So it sounds like you guys had sounds like a significant number of guardrails that you had to play within in order to make this work, just given who was backing it. Is that right?
Yeah. There's again, it's a nonprofit foundation, so it's mandates, it's impact driven. We report back on impact. We report back on job creation. We report back on some of the outcomes and deliverables that we've committed to, because it looks like a grant. I mean, it is a grant. It's a grant for outcomes that have an economic impact, hopefully, and we believe we've had an economic impact. We have the evidence to show it. So yeah, it looks more like a grant. It looks more like nonprofit world, and I think I'll share this. The current model we're working on, this bigger version of the studio, is also tapping into state and federal funding. So SSBCI funding, which is essentially a federal program where states could apply to get funding to help do small business kind of or entrepreneurial investments. Typically, SSBCI funds go to venture funds that a state is helping support. So like a small, I'll give you an example, a fund here in town, a small fund, it's a $5 million fund, they're getting a $5 million match. So it looks like matching dollars. So we're taking Walton Family Foundation dollars and seeking a match for a direct investment into this operating model. So we're having to be creative to make that come to life. But I think there's opportunity, like that's a unique, if we can prove that this is a better way to deploy those kinds of funds, what does the federal government care about? It cares about creating innovative companies in the United States to increase our security as citizens and as a country. Like if we're leading out on innovation and supply chain, retail value chain, and those kinds of concepts, we can become a tech hub in the next 10 years. If we can become the world-class center for all retail value chain here, because we've built numerous startups leveraging emerging technology and creating, these amazing commercial opportunities here in this region that benefits everybody, that benefits the state of Arkansas, that benefits the United States, that benefits everybody involved. I think that's a way to look at studios and a way to look at startup and venture studios that people aren't looking at right now.
Yeah. It's interesting how I'm really caught up on this impact play for the regional piece. Like that's the lesson that I think studios should walk away with is like, if you're looking to raise from family office dollars, it shouldn't be, if we want to raise from family offices, then we should create a regional, philanthropic or impact related play. Instead, it should be the other way around, which is, we have to build we need to have impact in whatever region we are connected to.
Mm-hmm.
So first question is the studio model the right model to achieve those goals? And then the next question is, might there be a family office that could be the right fit to back this? And I think if you go at it in that direction, it has a lot more potential to succeed because it's just better aligned than the other way around, chasing the dollars.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you're someone out there who has, and I would love to talk about just this idea. Before I say what I'm going to say, I want to share. I've talked to a lot of people who are trying to set up startup studios and venture studios. I know you have this, and it's a very open. I think the startup studio, venture studio world is very open and willing to share their processes. Like there's no competition. It's very much like, I'll tell you everything we're doing, what works, what doesn't work, because we're all trying to figure this out. So I love that. I will say that I do think sometimes the mentality is, if you just do the model this way and do these steps, you will produce a great outcome. You can achieve the IRR that beats traditional VC, and that is just not true. It's just false. This isn't like it kind of reminds me of the days of Scrum and Agile development. And just do Scrum and your team will build great code. And it's like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
This is still just about people. Like, it doesn't matter what process you're doing. Like the key ingredients matter. If the team doesn't have the mindset, if the experiences aren't there, if the network's not there,
yep, Yep.
That's what matters most.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, there was that analogy a couple of years ago of like, do you bet on the horse or do you bet on the horse trainer, right? Something like
right.
that. And for a
Yeah.
while, people in the studio were like, you bet on the horse trainer. I
Yeah.
don't agree with that I don't know if I did then. I definitely don't agree with it now.
Right. Yeah. I think you're right. I think it's a combination. Like all the pieces have to come into place. Yes, the model can be successful. We're all learning how to optimize it. We're all trying to get it to a place where it's producing the highest probability of success.
Yeah.
And I think anytime you industrialize something, we've gone from pick an item like, these pair of sunglasses here, right? Like when these were first made by an artisan, one person made every piece of this. They made the lenses, they made the frame, right? Like, and then the industrialization age came, and then we got really good at just making lenses, and we got really good at just making frames or just making the screws. And I think that's what we're trying to do as startups in a world that seems crazy, where it's ubiquitously known that 90% of startups fail. Somebody just said, is there a better way to do this? And then you ask yourself, well, where do things fail the fastest and at the highest rate? It's at the earliest stages. Product market fit isn't achieved. Validation isn't done. Confirmation bias takes place, and entrepreneurs fall in love with their idea and don't face the facts and the data that's right in front of them. They cherry pick what they want to see. And it removes a lot of those biases, like the process of startup studios and venture studios can remove the biases. You can industrialize parts and portions of the process. You can get really good at one stage. And anybody who's done a startup and seen it to it's from 0 to 1 million to 5 million to 10 to 20, which I've done. It's different. Getting from 1 to 5 is very different from 5 to 15 and 20. Like it looks different along the way. So like, let's just get really good at this first stage. Let's get really good at that and improve our chance of success. Like that's all we're trying to do.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say, you don't just like follow the model and now you're going to be a success story. And people who think that that's the case I wish them the best. And at the same time, I'm also like, it doesn't work that way. So yes, you need to have the right ingredients, the right talent, the right experiences, the right people involved, the right network, the right advantages. And then if you have all those things and you're sitting there thinking, man, I think I have all the ingredients to make a great studio, then let's ask, what region am I in? And how can I have an impact play here? Like what is my regions that I care about advantages? What are our capabilities? I mean, I could think of cities and metropolitan areas that have real advantages because of who's based there, or have accumulated capabilities over time because they're, the T&L hub. They're the central point from east to west, or, there's a lot of these areas in the US that have different capabilities. And if you're sitting in one of them and you're looking around, you're like, man, why aren't there more startups taking advantage of that? And you have all those ingredients. Yeah. Then ask yourself, are there other people in this region that care about this region? And family offices tend to care about where they build their fortunes.
Sure.
They tend to care about Tulsa if you're George Kaiser, and they tend to care about Bentonville if you're the Waltons, and they tend to care about insert name of another family who came out of a region. Yep. So then and it's like, I want to have an impact in this region. I want to build more jobs here. I want us to be economically successful and competitive in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think we can lead out in this area, but we need more companies to be innovating in that space.
Yep.
Go after it. That's the opportunity. I think that's unique and different. It's not the only way to play it. It's not the only way to do it, but I do think there's something to it.
Totally. So I'll sum it up before you kind of step into the next phase of this conversation with, if you are launching a studio and and this is for the listeners out there, if you're launching a studio and you have a direct love and passion and desire to bring impact to your region, family offices might be a great investor for you to talk to. And then that's part one. Part two on that is do it for the right reasons. Don't just do it because, turns out family offices care about their region. Let's go make up a story so that we can get them to give a shit and take a meeting with us and write a check. Like that will absolutely come and bite you, where pretty soon after. So, all right, Josh, we've covered how you got to where you are now. Let's shift gears a little bit to actually a couple of very quick questions. And then I want to dig into like what's going on today, what's happening day to day, what's happening in the studio. How How long have you guys been running now with Cartwheel, and how long has it been since fund was closed?
So we officially kicked off in the summer of 2021.
Okay.
We spent a few months kind of gathering the team, prepping for launch, if you will. I would say we really got going in October of 2021 through the Walton Family Foundation funding, and launched two companies in 2022. I'll just kind of tell that narrative. We launched our first two in 2022. Just to say it, like in a model where you have to facilitate funding, you can't really hit your 4 company a year target that a lot of studios hit. The facilitation of fundraising is just it's too much weightlifting to do that. And it requires a lot of effort and a lot of pulling on everybody's network. So I think two a year is kind of the max velocity in our current setup. We're trying to break out of that. So we're working towards this model where we're more funding and deploying it in a way that allows us to not have to fundraise for every new company, at least in that pre-seed round.
Sure.
And then, we're launching a third company right now. So we actually just launched. I shouldn't say we are launching. I've been saying it's coming for so long. I'm so used to that now. But we just launched our third company in the manufacturing tech space. So we looked at manufacturing makes a lot of sense for us, manufacturing tech in particular in this region, because we have over 1,400 consumer product good companies based in Northwest Arkansas. Not
Whoa.
based, sorry, office tier.
1,400 in Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah, I think the last time it was counted, it was 1,484, but or some number like that is the last time I saw it quoted. But Sam Walton demanded if you were a supplier to Walmart that you have an office here. I think in the 70s or 80s, I can't remember how long ago that was, but so you have offices here for Hershey's, for Kellogg's, for Haribo, gummies. Like you'll drive around town and see your favorite snack office next to your favorite restaurant. I mean, which is fun.
It's back to the regional play. It just makes sense. It's so simple. It makes so much sense. All right.
Yeah. So we look at businesses and launch companies that, take advantage of that. And our latest one is one of those, manufacturing tech, and it's technology that helps a manufacturing facility monitor their line and does predictive maintenance. So it has an AI ML component like anything now does, but helps you identify what's going to fail next. So if you're a bottler, if you're Coke, and actually we've piloted this at or has been piloted technically for several years now. This was a unique one in that we partnered with an agency that had already built the technology, but didn't have a company surrounding it. It was a side of the desk project for a software development agency. And we're like, hey, we can turn that into a company. Like you've already got revenue flowing in from a large Coca-Cola bottler in Europe. Yeah. We think we can scale this with you. We need to pull it out of your shop and turn it into a company, get a CEO. So this one was different, but I mean, I'm answering all your questions that you were going to ask around what we're doing today, but
no, it's good. I'm curious. So there's been chatter over the years of, so now you've got a family office on board. Like you've done the hard work of getting them to write a check and the money's wired. Great. Now what? So what's going on day to day with the foundation? Are they involved? What's going on?
No, the way our relationship works, it's a grant again. So we report on that grant. So we report on a periodic basis about our progress, outcomes, et cetera. We stay in kind of constant connection with the kind of surrounding entities in ways. Everybody's trying to be helpful, which is fantastic. Like that, when you have a great ecosystem, when you have a true entrepreneurial ecosystem in a region, everyone wants to be helpful. So that office does a great job, and they get solicited by a lot of people, but they do a great job of introducing us to opportunities. Like, hey, here's a VC fund that wants to come to town and tour Bentonville and meet with the family office or meet with somebody related in one of their programs or entities, and we think that this would be interesting for Cartwheel to talk to. There might be some opportunities for them to invest in a startup, or maybe there's a concept there that they're working on. It's been a mixed bag of a lot of different things. So it just looks like support, honestly. I mean, we report back to them on our progress in all the ways that you would expect.
Yeah.
and they're very supportive. Like they connect us with America Frontier Fund or Antler, or I don't know. There's a group coming out here every other week, it seems like, and we get
Yeah.
kind of pulled into that parade, which is honestly to our advantage because we end up those. That's how this last company came about. Like we got introduced to somebody through somebody through somebody, and those 7 degrees eventually lead to something.
So let's change the perspective slightly here to now. Let's assume there are some family offices listening, right? This whole time we've been talking to studio about how.
Yeah.
So if there are family offices listening and they're like, oh yeah, this whole studio model, I've heard of this. What do they need to know? How can they get involved? What's the benefit to them? How can they like be competitive here? And that's it. Let's start with this question because now that I'm talking about it, it comes to mind. Do you think family offices care about being the best family office, having better returns than the next family office? Does that mean anything to them?
That's an interesting question. I don't have a, I can't speak from experience. Like I'm not a family office person. I've never worked inside of a family office, and I'm not, someone who came from some large trust.
Sure.
So I would speak only from the outside and conjecture really, which is I don't feel that. I don't sense that in
Yeah.
the few family offices I've had connection to.
Yep.
I do think they want the few that I've been connected to all care about the region. So we ended up working with, I mentioned George Kaiser Foundation, and Atento. Atento is a private investment fund out of Tulsa. So I ended up doing some consulting for free. I just kind of wanted to help with them setting up this 19 days. So I offered our deck, I offered all of our materials. I was like, here's everything we're trying to do and why we think this matters for a region.
Yeah.
So I do think if you're a family office and you have objectives or I think everybody has ROI, ROI or IRR objectives. If you have money, you're trying to grow it. Otherwise, you feel like it's shrinking on you just by
Yeah.
standing still. So um, I think this is a unique model in that you can achieve multiple things. I think most family offices strive for ROI and impact. Now, what their impact is and what they care about is probably different from one to one, but I think they all try to have some kind of impact.
Yeah.
And I do think the studio model is a unique way to have both. Like it's very hard to have an investment also have an impact in your region. Like if you're investing in startups, what am I going to do? Hey, I'll make a $500,000 investment in your company if you move to our region. That's one way to do it.
Yeah.
How many are going to say yes to that? Now you're limiting the number of deals you can even have access to.
Yeah.
Everything you do when you're trying to mix ROI and impact is going to have its own trade-off. It's going to constantly run into trade-off land.
Yeah.
You're not going to have the best deals if you're having those kind of impact constraints. So I think what's unique about the startup studio and venture studio model is that you can have both. Like you can have an ROI and you can debate if it's better than VC or not. Stats can be debated all day. It clearly can have returns. Like let's say it that way. Like this model can produce high caliber companies when done well with the right ingredients. It can produce higher probability of success rates. I do believe that. And if you can have that, if you can create ROI and also build a thesis around impact and build companies that leverage your capabilities and impact in the way you want to have impact. Maybe you're not just someone who cares about your region's economic growth, but you care about conservation, environmental impact. Like you're trying to turn your family. I want my family office investments to have some sort of environmental conservation impact. Like you can build a startup studio around that. You can. The two worlds can coexist. So yeah, I mean, if you're asking, what can a family office consider here? I think it's a very compelling investment opportunity if you have impact as part of your thesis. I really do. I don't know that there's a better way to do it, actually.
On that note, I'll start by asking types of results are you guys already seeing, and where do you want to be in, let's say, 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah, we've launched 3 companies. Our first 2 are still under their initial invested. So we helped facilitate the fundraising of Pushkin. I think we raised just under 850K in total in that first pre-seed safe round. Hashku is actually our second company. It had an initial funding of about 100K, and it's doing its own fundraising. They also closed some sales deals that have helped kind of bridge them, and that was part of their focus. Like, hey, let's go close these deals, and that will help the fundraising. So they're just kicking back off. They closed just under $500,000 for the deals, which is awesome.
Amazing.
Leveraging the CPG network here in town, that was kind of part of their play. And then this latest company, Qantas, already has, I mean, it's going to do $2.7 million this year. Not many companies can say that when they just launched. And ours is unique in that it already had some revenue and it was a product. So it's just unique and different in all kinds of ways. So yeah, I mean, so far we're happy with what we've learned and what we've done. Like anything, if I went back in time to day one, I would do things very differently. There's no doubt. But I think as you ask about the next 5 to 10, I just want to have more impact here. We're doing an accelerator in January. Most startup studios don't do that. We're lacking it here, and we have the capabilities to do it. We're doing it with Coinbase and Han Ventures. We have some amazing partners in it. Looking at adding a couple of other partners. We're leveraging JB Hunt and Tyson and some Walmart individuals who are participating. So we've got some amazing contributors in terms of big enterprise. Like, I think that's going to be a huge success.
I mean, this
for the region
is the entire bottom line of when you have an aligned ecosystem of stakeholders, and then you throw a startup studio right in the middle as the center of that flywheel that can start to activate all of them coming together to do things.
Yes.
And the studio is the nucleus of that. Look what's happened. You're 2 years in, and you've already got 3 companies doing all this revenue. I mean, dude, great job. Fantastic work so far. I mean, so you just mentioned then you do things very differently. If it were back to day one, what would you do differently?
Oh man. I think there's easy things to say and there's things I'm still noodling on. Like, easy things to say, learned very quickly. We need to kind of work on concepts. Like everybody, I assume most studios start with a lot of concepts, and we do a Kanban approach. Like, we have a concepting phase, and then we winnow those down with a diagnostic scoring system that we came up with ourselves, and that helps us prioritize what concepts we're going to work on in that first cohort. And we create cohorts. I'm like, okay, we're going to go do research around this cohort, and then we winnow them down over time through stages. That first one was rough. And we had concepts all over the place: an HR tech company, a QSR tech company, a supply chain company. I mean, it was just all over the place.
Yeah.
Now, do they all fit our thesis? Yes. Now, when we're doing this process, I'm like, man, I'm talking to, Blaine Hurst is someone we've talked to about a concept or two. He's former CEO of Panera Bread, former president at Papa John's or Papa Murphy's, one of those two. I'm spacing it. Sorry, Blaine, if you're listening. Love you. But we're sitting here talking to this amazing individual who's had tremendous experiences, asking him about this concept we're working on. And it hit me. I was like, oh, it would be great if, wouldn't it be fun and easier if I could talk to him about 2 or 3 concepts? Like, if we were to affinity map our concepts and to take them, to add that to the cohort prioritization and be like, oh, well, these are adjacent to each other. I can talk to one subject matter expert, one industry leader about 2, maybe 3 concepts and cover my assumptions with him or her about, I could get more done faster. Like, simple things like that. Like, you don't think about up front when you're trying to linearly think through how you're going to do things. And then you start doing it and you're like, you retrospect and you ask yourself how that could have been done better. And so we do that now. Now, this next cohort is supply chain focused. They shouldn't be competitive ideas, but they're adjacent to each other. Like, I could talk to one expert and perhaps answer 2, 3 different concept assumption questions.
Yeah.
That's one thing as an example.
Love it. We're just about at our time here today. If there's 1 or 2 things that you'd like our listeners to walk away with, and we've got a nice mix of people who want to start a studio, people who are already starting a studio. We've got VCs, we've got entrepreneurs, we've got LPs, we've got agency leaders, we've got lawyers, we've got the whole stack of stakeholders that are intrigued by and interested in the studio world, what's one thing you think everybody should know right now?
Yeah, we beat the dead horse on impact and family office approach, and regional approach. I'll continue the thread that I started and didn't quite finish about when I mentioned the accelerator. Like, I see a lot of startup studio people thinking, and I was this way too. Like, I want to get into venture. I know, like, you've dabbled in the venture fund realm too. So like, I want to get into venture funds. Like, that's a thing. I just find it fascinating, compelling. A finance and accounting degree background that I never used, and an MBA to boot. I mean, I use it in different ways, but I think that's a lot of people thinking, or a lot of the trajectory for a lot of people thinking about startup studio is to get into venture, and the venture studio is that combination of startup studio and sidecar fund. I don't see a lot of people talking about the words you used just a couple minutes ago of like a venture engine, like
Yeah.
a startup studio, an incubator, an accelerator. I think that's more compelling and more interesting. And maybe it's only because I'm thinking regionally, but the advantages that we create to get to that virtuous cycle, that flywheel effect where the startup studio can be a core component of it. Like,
Yeah.
you want to create a whole new venture engine, like a thing that generates new companies and accelerates them too.
Yeah.
And yes, you need venture funding, venture capital, but venture capital is just a component of a new company, but we treat it like it's the cart driving the horse, right? It's like, no, it's just a component of starting a company. It's not the
Yeah.
thing. So how do you create an engine? I would love to have more people exploring that and exploring approaches of building a full engine,
Yeah.
a new venture development engine. And that's something we care about.
Yeah.
And as opposed to just thinking about VC and attaching it to a studio and the
Yeah.
components there. And yeah, there's lots. That model still needs to be fleshed out too. It's still early, but I think there's
Totally.
other ways to do it.
There's a book I'll plug that I remember reading twice actually in 2017, 2018. The book is, I believe it's called Startup Communities. It's by Brad Feld.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I read it when I was, for those who are listening who don't know, like, where I first got my start with Studio World, Josh, I'm not sure you even knew this, but I
Yeah,
graduated
please.
from college. I was 21 or 22. And I joined a studio called Boulder Bits in Boulder, Colorado, as the VP of branding. And in 2017, it was very, very early for the studio world. And because of a lot of the challenges that we were facing at Boulder Bits, we sought help from other studios, which led to the creation of GSSN. We're like, let's put everyone in a Slack channel. And that's where it all started. But anyway, I read this book twice, this book by Brad Feld. And by the way, Brad Feld was in Boulder, and we were already very close with him, he was a friend of the studio, and everybody in Boulder at the time, and still does, just absolutely love this man. He's an incredible guy. And the biggest takeaway I got from this book was, the book was about, like, how do you build a thriving startup community? What are the ingredients? And those ingredients are, in his eyes, a university, a big, like, downtown active location, with, like, in Boulder's case, it was Pearl Street. It was a cobblestone multi-block area where all the startups are located, with coffee shops and bars and restaurants and startup offices and agency offices all meeting up, running into each other at lunch, right? And then you've got bigger companies, corporates that are maybe a little bit down the street that could feed into all of this. And when you've got this ecosystem of young talent from the university, plus hackers and builders with all the startups, and then big time money from the corporates, and, like, serious reach and data and distribution, then you have funds up on top of that to, like, deploy the money and make something happen. Now you've got the core ingredients for a startup community to potentially thrive. So anyway, we read this book and we took those learnings and we're like, well, what if we just made this philosophy the philosophy of our startup studio? We're like, we'll host events on our rooftop once a month and bring the founders in town here. We'll bring the agencies in town here. We'll bring the corporates and the investors in town here. We just wanted to be the nucleus of this startup community, which would allow us to build companies for this region and understand what problems need to be solved, and and who was struggling with what and how money was being moved. So anyway, long story short, I feel like the days of the ecosystem play when it comes to the studio conversation have gotten lost somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't even know where that got lost or when, but I haven't talked about that with folks in the studio world in probably 4 years now.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about there. I love how that sounded, and it's hard to measure. Like, you can't measure the value of those events, but you're
Yeah.
creating these collisions and these serendipitous interactions that turn into new opportunities. And like, if I look at the last 2 years, almost everything that has come our way has come from these just collisions, these random like network things that happen when you participate, when you host events or go to events and help kind of stir the pot.
Totally.
Things come out of that. You're right. Yeah, it's so yeah, I want to ask you before we wrap here. I'm curious, like what do you think? Like, where do you see startup studios? What do you think will be different 5 years from now?
Yeah.
Or you can go to 10 if you want, but like somewhere in the 5 to 10 range, what's different? Like, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, 5 to 10 range is a long time, because even looking back 5 years ago, there were like 80 studios in the world, and today there are somewhere between 1,500 and 2,500, and like the fact that we don't even have an exact number is one of the problems that we're seeking to solve in the gallery. I'll share I hold what's that silly phrase? It's like strongly held opinions, or strong opinions loosely held.
Loosely held, yeah,
loosely held. So I'm a guy that has strong opinions, loosely held, always am, and I say that because I love like storytelling and having some gusto around what I feel and believe, but I bring these things up all the time with the invitation to dissect and discuss and help me evolve and grow and have discourse. Because if I change my mind and have a new viewpoint and opinion and perspective on something in 2 years or in 6 months or in 3 hours, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
The rest of this country might not agree with me because of the state where we're at, but whatever. So I bring that up because what I thought about studios 5 years ago and 2 years ago and 1 year ago is not what I think today. And I've been kind of quiet about that, especially the last 2 years. And for the people that have, used to read my newsletter and used to follow me heavily, they probably noticed over the last year or so, I've been very quiet about the studio world. And it's for the following reasons. I used to think that studios were it. Like this was, and I was maybe young or naive, or the space was too young and naive. I'm still young and naive. I hope I'm always young and naive. But for whatever reason, I looked at studios as this is going to disrupt everything in venture. This is going to change how startups are built. This is going to change how investors invest. This is going to change how corporates launch new innovative tools and products. This is going to change how government creates new innovative things. And so I set on a path for years to, under that belief and that mantra, like I'm going to make that world come to life. I am all in on studios because I want to live in that world. And I no longer think that that's going to be the case because of so many reasons. What I think now, though, and I think this is where we're going to be in definitely in 5 years, probably more like 2 or 3, and we're kind of already here. But I do think now that it's all just venture capital. And I don't really even know how to phrase it right now, but there was a time, and there's probably even content out there if someone wants to like dig up my old content and try to flame me on this. I'm sure it's on the internet somewhere. Like I used to say, like studios will disrupt venture capital. And then there was a time where I was like, well, studios are a subset or a corner or like a new flavor on venture capital. I don't believe that right now. Right now, what I think is VC is the umbrella, which is within the private equity umbrella, by the way, for people that for some reason separate private equity and VC. Like it's the same umbrella. VC. And then within the venture capital umbrella, well, you have funds that invest at pre-seed, and you have funds that invest at seed. And you have some funds that like to accelerate the companies that they work with. They're called accelerators. And then you have some funds that get in at later rounds, like the B or the C round, and they're growth funds. Then you have pre-IPO funds. Oh, but wait, you also have funds that like to build startups from scratch, and those are called studios. Are any of these better or worse than the others? depends how you define better. Like, do some have different IRRs and superior or inferior TVPIs or exit rates or speed to? Sure, but like it's all so anecdotal and conjecture right now that I can't sit here at my desk or go to an event and tell someone like studios are better. The data is there because the data is not there. It's just not. I have
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah, you
That,
need that full 10-year cycle on a large sample size. And we don't have a full 10-year cycle on a large sample size.
or a large sample. Yeah, we don't have either of those things. So I look at it now though as, but I love that all the bases and different flavors of venture are covered because not one, there's no one size fits all entrepreneur or investor. Like some entrepreneur,
Yes.
they all have different risk appetites. They all come from different places in life. They all live in different regions, they all have different needs. They're building different types of companies. And it's, I think anyone who's been in startup world for more than like 2 years would agree with me in saying venture capital is not right for every founder. And I would say startup studios are within that. They're definitely not right for every founder and they're not right for every investor. So it's a broad answer to where I think we'll be in 5 years is just like studios are one of the models and it works great for some types of entrepreneurs. And it's a terrible model for other types of entrepreneurs. And depending on the mission and the thesis, it could be great. It might not be the right fit. Yeah. That's how I look at it. And so I'll plug the gallery one more time here of like the reason this new publication is being birthed and popping up is to, I want to say, just spread that message of like, there's every other angle of venture capital has been figured out and there's some standardization and there's conversation and debate around it, but studios haven't had that yet in like one centralized place. That's all we're here to do. We're not here to tell the world that we're better or the right model or the best model. We're just here to shed light on this model for those who it might be the right fit for, or for a place for them to find out that it's not the right fit. Great. Start a company in a different way rather like that so that you're more successful.
Yeah, I like that. I like what you're saying a lot. I like this idea of, I think if I said it back to you, I'm like, okay, I think I hear you saying we're still discovering where this thing works the best, how this thing works the best, and when this thing works the best.
Yeah.
And it might look a little, I mean, there's no doubt it's going to look different. I like that. I do think there's more discovery, more things just need to play out. And we're in it's a nascent, shifting kind of thing where we're trying to figure out what are the later stage impacts. I mean, there's been articles written about how the cap table looks to a VC in a later stage for a company coming out of a studio. And those are things we've looked at and thought about for a long time, and try to be cognizant of. And there's so many things being learned that I think it's another tool in the toolkit. And the venture development toolkit, it's another tool that is right in some instances. And we're still trying to figure out exactly when and where it's right. Yeah. Am I saying that back to you a little? I feel like that's what you're saying.
Absolutely what I'm saying. It's totally another way to phrase it. I think there's like a couple of core macro trends that I want to just look at. I'll never ever sit here and tell anyone like this is how the future is going to be, or like I'm predicting this is what's going to happen in a few years. If anyone ever says that, they're crazy. No one can see into the future. We can only look at the past and try to be confident and thoughtful about what's going on and try to skate to where the puck is. But like, that's what investing is. We like take a risk and we think we have a thesis, we believe in it, we stand by it, we go for it, but we have to be adults and recognize the fact that we probably were wrong and look back at the time and be like, I made a bet. I'm glad I did. This is how the dice, sometimes we're right and you get rewarded for it. But that's the game we're playing. The trends that I think are important here, and I don't know if this is a comprehensive list, but I'll just off the top of my head. Number one, venture in general is certainly having an identity crisis, just based off of zero interest rate phenomenon for a few years and interest rates where they're at now. There's definitely an interesting trend of what I'll sum up as the long tail of funds and venture in general. If you look at the data, the most popular funds, the ones that we all think about when you think of venture capital, they actually don't have the best returns when it comes to IRR data, and that's based off so many factors. So that's interesting. This realization that not all venture and all founder relationships and experiences are created equal. That's a new general wake up. Like I was all in on venture for the last 10 years. I freaking love this world. And I'm starting a company right now that I'm like, I will not raise money for this. And I actually never raise money again. It's like you talk to any exited founder and ask them, would you do this again? Would you raise money again? And I can't say all of them, but the vast majority that I've asked that question to are like, hell no. If I could avoid VC again, I would. And that's interesting. That's a trend.
Yeah.
And then probably the most important one is the cost to build things is plummeting. That's awesome. Like I couldn't have even built anything I'm building right now 6 months ago. Couldn't have done it because my reliance on ChatGPT and a few other AI tools, and even using like global payroll tools to make moving money across the world to my contractors so much easier. All of that stuff has gotten so much cheaper and easier in the last 6 months, let alone year or two, that completely changing my need for raising capital. And it's going to, all of those things I mentioned, I think will put enormous stress on what we traditionally think of as the studio model. And new models will come to light because of it. New structures and tax approaches and legal approaches will likely come to light. Which ones are best and ideal? No idea. But again, we're here to report on it and share and talk about it and like get it out to the world and get more people starting companies. That's it. More people starting companies.
Yeah, man, love it. Thanks for sharing that. That was good. I appreciated that.
Page there with that one.
That was good. I like it. I think there's a lot of what you said that I agree with. I'm going to noodle on it some more too. It's we're definitely in an interesting economic cycle right now.
Totally.
Across the board, everybody's having to kind of process what's happening and what it will mean in the next 12 to 24 or beyond. And so, alongside that is the startup studio, venture studio model. Like, what does it mean? What does all this mean for this model, and where's it going?
100%. I think the worst thing any of us can do right now is sit and idly by and watch and wait. It's easy to do that right now because things are stressful. Like, let's see what happens. Let's see what the Fed decides. Let's wait till the LP their money to the VC so we can, like, fine, wait, go ahead and wait. You're going to miss everything. This is where things are happening. So almost like an ode and a shoulder tap to, I don't even know if that's a phrase, shoulder tap, a thumbs up to those that are like, let's freaking build right now. Let's figure this thing out. And just, I don't even know what's going to happen, but like, I'm not going to sit and watch. Josh, it's great to have you here. If you can give a quick like call to action for everyone listening, for yourself or for Cartwheel, how can folks get in touch? What would you ask?
Follow us on LinkedIn. That's the best way to know what we're up to. We're not the most socially active, I wouldn't by any means, but we will share what we're doing there, and then reach out. Like if there's something we can be helpful with, or if you have we're always looking for new founders and always looking for new concepts, always open to conversations. We are limited in the fact that we have to build companies out of Northwest Arkansas, and that is a thing. But some people are open to that. So we're always open to those kinds of conversations. And if we can be helpful, my email is josh@cartwheel.studio.